Otherwise we'll have to shout.
Is that all?
Yeah.
For Josh's reference, I have a background as a physicist. Thank you, Josh.
I've written that before I realised who else was speaking.
Lol.
No, that was wonderful, Josh. Thank you very much for that, Josh. So my name is Kit Rackley. My pronouns are they, them, she, her. I have given lots of talks in the past talking about my personal journey and my identity. I'm not going to do that right now because, quite frankly, I'm quite fed up with myself. But seriously, it's what I really wanted to do there was take Sam's very vague brief, thanks for that, Josh, Sam, and then really kind of go to town with regards to, well, what does my identity coexist and intersect with the work that I do? So just a quick background, really. So I am a teacher trainer, I'm an educator, I'm an ex-high school teacher. I taught high school just outside of Norwich for 13 years. I was a geography and a drama teacher, so I might go a bit drama queen on you during this time. But I'm still involved in education and outreach, but through my climate work, as I've described at the moment. Yes, I am throwing a towel over a kid's head. Don't worry, it was on the risk assessment. I've done performance art as well, so my main way of conveying some of my stuff is through performance poetry. I did consider the loose brief again, Sam, and doing a bit of poetry tonight, but Alfredo's going to do something even more better during the half-time show, so I'm going to leave that to him. And I do some educational material as well through videos and through podcasting and things like that, so I do have a public presence online, which is quite interesting, bearing in mind that I started to have this public presence before I started to transition. So that's a story for another time, really. Because my main specialism is climate science. So I currently work at the University of Stanley's Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research. And really it's become full circle, because that's where I did my degree. And again, Josh, in 2001 to 2004.
I would have been one.
I know. So I graduated in environmental science with lots of physics in 2004, and then I did my PGCE as a teacher in geography, and then spent 13 years teaching geography. And my main specialist was climate science, and I had the absolute privilege of doing my dissertation with some of the world's leading climate scientists at the UEA, so it's beggars belief that's come full circle. I'm now working with these people in the Tyndall Centre. But I have a lot of intersectionality with this work, because I also do a lot of work as a consultant with a geographical association and other people about decolonising the geography curriculum and what's the intersectionality, because for me geography is very intersectional and interdisciplinary, and so that actually has lent itself quite well, which I'll demonstrate now. So there's three words I'm going to get you to consider during my talk, and that is these three words here: fear, learn, and grow. So I'm going to take you through this, because this actually came from something I discovered when I was I'm still a part of them, I'm more on the fringes now, but I was involved quite a lot with a collective called Decolonising Geography, and this is a group of wonderful educators, teachers, lecturers, but mostly like high school, primary level, attempting to decolonise the geography curriculum in the United Kingdom. And it's a very vibrant society, and we've done a lot of work to try and inform people's practice. And so within the group, somebody posted this, and I thought, this is really interesting, because how exactly do you become, decolonialised in your mindset? How exactly do you become anti-racist, anti-bigots, things like that? So this was posted, it was framed by someone called Dr. Andrew M. Ibrahim, and it really kind of gives a really good sense of maybe why people think they feel, but also how can they move forward? So how can they come out of this fear zone and move through into a learning and then potentially into a growth zone? And this is a very malleable kind of model where you can do other things with it. So, I had to go at making one to be how to be a trans man. I know we've got some of my colleagues from UEA staff pride who I've shown this to. And I've seen various different versions of this, how to be anti-ableist, anti-Islamophobia, all these kinds of stuff. And it's a really fantastic tool. And I realised that the more and more I was doing my work on climate science and the impacts of climate, how much this model actually resonates with my work. So I'm going to explain that for you. I'm going to take those three zones as we go along. So the first one is the fear zone. Now, just a quick note about this graphic. This graphic kind of, it's a weird one to represent fear, but this is a piece of Aboriginal art. There's the reference down there at the bottom. And I did not know, but the reason why a lot of the Aboriginal art had become with more of these dots over time, especially during the colonial period, it was a way because they were fearing that colonial powers would be able to kind of like almost usurp the way that they communicate their language and take over their art. And so they kind of almost went into a coding structure where they put more dots into their artwork, which is absolutely fascinating. Now, I'm not an anthropologist or anything like that, so I might not have got that completely accurate, but that's even another intersectionality about the change in someone's environment and culture, because that does intersect with climate change. But I want to give you this figure of 11%. This is from a survey of 20,000 people across 27 countries, and this is the number of people who feel fatalistic about climate change. So they're fearful, of the fact that, well, it's an existential fear that they have. 11% of people think we're done for. Okay? And now here's another figure for you, 15%. So I'm going to add 4% onto that 11. And this extra 4% are denialists.
I'm so fabulous. I'm so amazing. I've solved everything. I've solved the Third World War. Well, I might have started it, but I've solved it already.
Those kind of denialists.
Told you I was an ex-drama teacher as well.
And this is like, the fear comes for these folks, maybe that why they deny this, maybe it's a fear of loss of control or a fear of change, of letting go, of maybe of conspiratorial fears, they think everyone's out to get them, and everyone's trying to change the system against them. Yes, we are. So that's a denialism added to that. I'm going to add another 20% into this poll, right? And this is the people who are defeatists. So this is like, I think humanity can deal with climate change, but I don't think we will. Right? So is this a fear of failure? Is this a fear of imperfection? Is this a fear of of worthlessness, of losing control? And so when you could put these all things together, I think to myself, well, where has this all come from? And so some of the work that I've been doing, I'm not asking you to read this word for word, but I'm not a psychologist, but there's a growing field of climate psychology about why is it people think this way. And so I try to work with high school teachers and think, hang on a minute, you haven't done any climate science yet. This is all psychology so far, bear with me. So I'm trying to look at these kind of biases, so I'm trying my very best to speak to people in this kind of realm of thinking, well, what are the biases that are causing people to feel this way, to feel fearful about climate and why we're not acting? So I actually kind of try to make school teachers aware of this, and I'll come to the reason why that in a minute. So for me, the fear bubble goes up to 83% in this poll, because that is if we add what we call the soft optimists. This is, I know humanity can do this, but I'm not sure we will. So it's not like they're completely fatalist or defeatist, it's like, I'm not sure. So maybe this is a fear of disappointment, a fear of reality, a fear of vulnerability, or a fear of uncertainty. 83%, right? That's a big number. And our kids are feeling this as well. This is a report telling folks that our children are scared, they're very nervous, and they have something called eco and climate anxiety. It's something I suffer as well. Okay? And this has come from a government report. So this is from the Climate Change and Mental Health Thematic Assessment Report, and there's a whole section on children's mental health. So to come out of this fear zone, we've got to go into the learning zone. And so for me, I'm a storyteller. So let me tell you a story. Because stories are the best way to learn through people's lived experience. Isn't that analogous to the people in the room? Listening to people's lived experience. I want you to, let's give this person a name. I'll tell Josh. I've got to let him pay now that you said about the physicist. So here's little Josh, right? He's there, he's at home, he's in an isolated Norfolk village, so he's probably it's not me. And it's starting to absolutely rain. I would say E+. It's absolutely pissing it down, right? So, and then he wakes up the next morning, his village looks like this. And his house is fine, the house is fine, but the road is cut off, the river is flooded. And so his teacher notices that some of it, first of all, is why are you bloody wearing your wellies? And I wouldn't allow that to happen in school. But anyway, the teacher's going, hang on a minute, where's little Josh? Right. And then she knows the reason why he might not be, because he's cut off and he's at home. And the only way he can get to school is through canoe from his neighbour. That's not a fake story, that's a true story. Of a school just outside of Bungay on the north side of the River Waveney. Here's another one. My teacher, my kids' teacher from my kids' primary school told me the 5th heat wave that we had last year, she had to dump the stationery out of their stationery trays and get them to put water in those trays to put their feet in so they can cool down, because their behaviour was deregulating. And it was causing actual suffering, and there was hardly any learning. But she said, Kit, I probably only got through about 20% of what I would have got through in a normal day. Learning is being lost because of these climatic changes. Anyone here from Framingham? Not Framingham, Framlingham. I taught at Framingham Earl High School, not Framlingham. The amount of posts I got for Suffolk. This is a picture of Framlingham during Storm Babette in 2023. And another story here is that there were children that couldn't get picked up at lunchtime when they knew the weather was coming and were stuck in that building for 24 hours. That's not happening in Bangladesh, or it is. It's not happening in Kent. This is happening in Framingham and other places in the United Kingdom. So here's some more figures for you. 87 billion. Can you give me a 5-minute warning, sir? Because I will go over time, otherwise. So, this is apparently, and I don't like to think this way because I am a bit of an anti-capitalist, but this is apparently the total value of our ecosystem services to the UK's GDP. 87 billion. That's 3% of our GDP. Do you know how much we spend on defence? 2.4 at the moment. So apparently, if you could quantify nature, it's worth more than we spend on our military budget. So why aren't we treating it as an asset as it is? So that's one fact for you. Here's another fact for you, right? Ready? 93%. That's the number of children who report who are happy when they spend time in nature. Almost all the kids surveys say nature makes them feel happy. One more. 72%, right? This is the amount of carbon emissions a school admits that the children have no control over. So this is the procurement of, well, the stuff, the food, the stationery, this is the staff commuting, this is the waste management, things like that. Right? And again, these are either government or government adjacent studies. So they bloody know. They know that this is going on, right? So we've got, that's directly from the government, from the top there. The middle one is from Natural England. So they're an independent aside, but supported by the government. And below is Count Your Carbon, which is the scheme, well, indirectly it's the scheme I'm a part of. So I am paid by the DfE to support schools with climate action. And one of the sister projects we are with is with Count Your Carbon. Oh, okay, now the story is coming behind about why KIT is what, is focused on these. Now, here's some of my research for you. Because not all of these impacts are even. Here's some more facts for you. Don't worry about the detail, it's just the differences in the colours is what's important. Now, there's already been a study by the Department for Education along with University College London that say children are already losing up to 7 days of learning because of the heat. And that could go up to 12 days if the current warming continues by 2100. And that's on top of existing reasons why kids lose school days. And yes, as you know, sometimes being a climate scientist is depressing, because listen to this. 33% of primary schools across the country and 59% of secondary schools across the country are already at high risk of flooding per year. Just let that sink in. And I'm sorry for any of you who have kids of school age, but 1 in 3 primary schools and over half secondary schools are already at... So basically, any given year, there's a 1 in 30 chance that school site will flood. So why do I care about this? So part of my research is not just about these things are happening at schools, but it's not equitable. There is an injustice here, a climate injustice. Everywhere where you see a red patch, and down in this area, like down here, like Great Yarmouth, things like that, if you add in deprivation measures, you then start to get something called climate vulnerability. So everywhere where there's red, flood on the left, heat on the right, is an area of the country which is more vulnerable to either flood risk or heat risk because of their levels of deprivation. So climate change is a climate and social justice issue. How does that sound familiar to people in the room? Can you see now the parallels? And this is how my identity, I feel, has helped me to inform this, to advocate and make people aware of this. So the scheme that I work with the DFE through the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research is trying to highlight that our impacts on our children are not even when it comes to climate change. So, I've been banging about this for years now. So we've got some facts. First thing is, we know the climate is changing, and we know the climate is human-made, and we know it is impacting our extreme weather events. We know that. Science says that's possible. We can even quantify the probability that an individual event is attributed to climate change. It's called extreme weather attribution, right? We know this is impacting our schools, like I've already told you those stories, right? And if you're a teacher, and any teachers put more school staff in the room? Right. Oh, bless you. Congratulations. I retired after 13 years when I was still in my early 30s, so well done you. You've done more service than me. But as you well know, we've got all these statutory obligations, right? We've got all these things we must do by law, and one of them is we have to look after the children. It's law. It's called safeguarding. And that is why if you add all these three things together, climate change is a safeguarding issue in schools. So that is the crux of my work. And I think I would have got there eventually, but I honestly believe that my ability and my self-growth as a trans person, realizing I'm an intersectional person with all these beautiful things that have come together, I've been able to come to this conclusion in a unique way, because I found that this issue is quite niche, shockingly niche. And so I'm now trying to make sure that this is being highlighted on a national scale, on a policy scale. So the last section is grow. How do we grow? How do we, now we've learned, what do we do to grow? So for me, as I've just said, all this stuff is intersectional. So it all comes together, one big intersection in the middle. Okay? And so I'm going to be releasing a paper soon with a colleague in Oxford about how can we make sure we grow. So there's 5 things that we're proposing. We're proposing, and again, I want you to think of the analogy of how we should support our queer community, right? So the first one is you acknowledge the issue, you don't avoid it. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it will impact your school eventually if you don't do something about it or the government doesn't do something about it. Again, think of the analogy about our existence as queer people, right? You have to acknowledge us, you can't avoid us. Just like Josh quite rightly said, we exist, right? Number 2, be careful with your language. You know, Sam said that before we started, he said to me, Kit, can I just double check your pronouns are correct? Yeah? That's not putting himself out, myself out, that's just being careful with language. Yeah? So when we talk about climate issues with children, is that rather than saying, you need to help and do more, you need to drive less, you need to turn off the lights, you should do... Don't forget, climate change is a social justice issue. Some of them may not be able to do that, they might have to drive. They might not be able to turn... It might not be safe at home for them to turn around and ask their parents to turn their lights off, because they might get a... We know that still happens. That's safeguarding. So we need to be careful with our language. You know, is it possible for? Who do you think should take responsibility for? That kind of language. Number 3, being institutionally honest. Institutionally honest, that means where exactly is the emissions coming from in your school and the education sector? And you'll find that only a quarter of it, perhaps the pupils and their parents might be able to influence. The other 75% of it, they can't do anything about. They've got to be honest about it. Just like what's happening now, we've got all these pressures with the EHRC and, you know, our right to exist as we as we believe we should, but there is a lack of institutional honesty at the moment at government level. Having the support structures in place, not this whole British thing of a stiff upper lip, we can get through this, we survived the war, haha, yeah? But that's great, stoicism is great, but where's the support structures for us? The fact that you are here, I feel that you are a soft support structure because you're showing your support for the queer community just by simply being present and listening to our stories. Right? You're not coming up to me and saying, Kit, get over it. You're British, right? So support structures, not stoicism. The same goes with our children experiencing these issues. And share the responsibility. It is not one person's or one group's responsibility. It's not my responsibility to educate everybody on trans identities. It's not Josh's responsibility to educate people about being gay. It is other people have got to also put themselves in a learning and growth zone and share the responsibility, because the power structures are not even. So, that you can see is how my work intersects with my identity, fear, learning, and growth. Thank you very much.
Wonderful talk. Thank you very much. We have time for probably one or two quick questions.